Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Labor Live at 12:05. We are so sorry we couldn't do an episode last week. Our office was down in Juneau for our annual legislative fly-in, but we are back today covering a new topic. And today we're actually taking a step back. Instead of focusing what's going on in Juneau, which, by the way, there's a lot, and we're going to continue to keep you updated on that in the future, we wanted to take a step back and take a look at what's going on at the federal level. I'm sure you've all been watching the news over the last couple of weeks, and it just seems like we're all getting whiplash from what's going on. So without further ado, I want to welcome our special guest. You know her, you love her, our political director, Kim Hayes. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex. I'm happy to be here, even if it's not, the most the most positive topic, but it sounds like something people need to know about.
Yeah, there's a lot of words we could probably use that we won't use on this channel to describe what has been going on in the federal government. But kind of from your perspective of just watching the news, could you maybe walk us through a little bit of what you're seeing?
Sure. And what I want to say to folks that are watching at home is I am just as overwhelmed, and I know you are, Alex, with all the news. It feels like our phones are constantly dinging with breaking news, and it can be a lot to take in, which is actually the plan from the federal government. The current administration is to kind of do this shock and awe tactic of breaking everything at once so that it's hard for us as the public to engage. But kind of what the 30,000 foot view of what we're seeing is a couple of things happening, at least a couple of things. First, everybody's watching all of these federal employees getting fired, thousands of them, and a lot of federal funding that our states rely on, especially Alaska, this funding being frozen for projects that are either already in the works or for programs that we all rely on in Alaska. So that's happening. Add into the mix something that seems completely dystopian is we have an unelected billionaire who has been given an all access pass to our data, right? Our Social Security data, you name it. Exactly. I was going to hold up my site too.
Got these brand new signs out.
Spoiler alert for what we're going to talk about at the end of the discussion, but going through our data, definitely not understanding what that data means, right? We've heard stories of him accusing Social Security paying out people who are 150 years old. We've talked to enough federal workers to understand this is a coding issue that he just doesn't understand. His DOGE organization doesn't understand. So these are really big and fast changes that are breaking the system. And this is something you and I know. We've studied the federal government and how the bureaucracy works in favor of the public. And so what's happening right now is lots of people being fired, a lot of people being fired accidentally, people that they didn't mean to fire being fired, people who protect our national security, tracking bird flu, you name it, they're being let go. So
yeah, wasn't there, I remember hearing something in the news about a bunch of people that work for, I forget the federal department, but they were basically in charge of maintaining and maintenance for the country's nuclear arsenal.
Right. And those people they're trying to get them back. And that's a really tough place to be in because, there's been a myth for a lot of years that our federal employees are overpaid. And we both know, and the people we know that work in federal service know that they're doing it for love of country because the skills that they have as federal employees, they could make a lot more money in the private sector, but they're doing it because they believe in the Constitution. They believe in what they're doing to protect our nation. And so it's going to be hard for those folks to take those jobs back, knowing what could happen to them. And so a lot of this is because things are moving so quickly and decisions are being made very indiscriminately, as we've talked about.
Yeah, and I know last Thursday I was still in Juneau, and I remember seeing the news that the Trump administration was going to move forward with firing all probationary employees in the federal government outside of DOD and maybe one or two other departments like the VA. Could you kind of what is a probationary employee? Like what does that mean?
Absolutely. I think it's important to understand what it means to be a probationary employee because I think a lot of folks who are familiar with the federal system don't understand that probation is not a bad thing. Probationary employee is just someone who's new to that position. It doesn't even mean they're new to the federal government. We've talked about this yesterday, Alex. There are people that work in a position for 15 years, but when they get a promotion to a new position, they're put back in probationary status. These are people that have less rights than, say, a longer serving federal employee, which is unfortunate. It makes them easier to fire. It does not make the work they do any less important. As we are finding out, some of these probationary employees are in charge of, work at the FAA and may be the only person that works at the FAA in that role. And so these are folks who have served in the federal government in many capacities, but are new to their role and are being let go completely willy-nilly. And the federal government is learning that they needed these people, or at least the Trump administration is now realizing they need to come back and try to get these people back in service.
Yeah, there was someone, I believe, sharing their story. I think it was today or yesterday on Facebook. So people in Alaska really might be seeing this online. She was the only administrative employee. So she handled the administrative aspect of the air traffic control team for the FAA based out of Fairbanks. And she was the only one in that position. So anytime they hire someone, she's the one that onboards them. Anytime air traffic controllers need to be scheduled for travel to go do additional training to make sure they're up to date, she's the one that does it. And right now, she was the only one, and she just got fired. So how do we expect that the air traffic control system to maintain its functionality in Fairbanks when they're just firing people willy-nilly?
Right. And, we have about 1,200 probationary employees in Alaska. We think, it can be hard to track this in this environment. That's $88 million in salaries taken out of our economy. So that's,
one more time. Did
88
you say
million.
88 million?
With an M.
Wow.
And that's just what we know, because like I said, things are moving so quickly as we're gathering stories, gathering information from our brothers and sisters who work in the federal government. That's the best information we have. And so there isn't just a story of a person losing their job. That's a national security issue. Or, I know people have in their hearts right now all of the air traffic incidents that have happened across the nation. It doesn't feel like a good time to be messing with the FAA. Not to say that there isn't things that need to happen at the FAA. I think if you talk to anybody who works in that system, they have great ideas. Firing people without any basis is not the way to make the American public feel safe about air travel. But it's also, there's an economic problem too, is when you take these people out of the workforce, they're not automatically getting new jobs somewhere. It doesn't work like that. And so that's a lot of money, not to say just our safety as the public.
Yeah. And before we move on to kind of our next topic of, what the House majority is doing in Congress for their budget, I think it's important to remember that, people often paint these individuals that work for the federal government as, bureaucrats, right? They're just some part of an autonomous, wheel that just keeps the federal government spinning. But no, these are our brothers and sisters. These are our union siblings. These are our fellow workers that do this work because they care. They care about what they do, and their job directly impacts the lives of every American. So I think it's important for us to realize that when we're firing these people, we're firing individuals who pay mortgages, who have bills, who have to feed their families. And that's a depressing fact to think about in this context.
Absolutely. And, we work in the labor movement. So, of course, in our roles, we're hearing a lot about what's happening with the National Labor Relations Board specifically, right? That's something near and dear to our heart. And we just got news today. We're talking about an unelected billionaire making changes in the government without thinking about it. It seems like a small thing, but besides the illegal firings of people who are involved with the NLRB, just today, the NLRB office that's in Region 3, that's in New York, they just got information from the DOGE saying, you got to get out of your building. You have 90 days. Like, get out. No rhyme, no reason. And these kind of things just hurt the stability of our country. I mean, this isn't just happening for the NLRB, as we know. We've got employees who have never worked in the office, right? Their department does telework as a function of their government job, who are now saying, well, you got to return to the office, an office that does not exist, or canceling folks who've teleworked for 10, 20 years saying, well, you have to come back to the office, as if that somehow relates to their productivity. You and I know there has been decades now of research saying there are people that are much more productive doing telework, and it also is a quality of life issue. So, this is directly related to the labor movement because these are things we bargain for. But the NLRB is very important. The National Labor Relations Board is very important specifically to the work we do in working people's rights. So that's just a little piece. Now just blow that up to every department in government, and that's what's happening.
Pure chaos.
Pure chaos.
Pure chaos. That is wild. So on the one hand, we have everything going on at the federal level with a completely reshaping of our federal government. But then I know right now we're probably in the middle of a budget cycle in the federal government. And I know the Republican majority that controls the U.S. House of Representatives is currently drafting what they envision for their, budget for the federal government and tax structure. Could you tell us a little bit about what that's currently looking like and how that might impact Alaska?
Absolutely. So one thing I want to point out is when a lot of these folks are running, including the current president, they talked about that they weren't going to touch these programs, social programs. They weren't going to touch Social Security. These were sacrosanct. We're not going to hurt the military. The budget that they are crafting, which has been reported in the news, is cutting all of those programs so that they can give $4.5 trillion, so that's trillion with a T, in tax cuts for the wealthy. You know, last time President Trump was in office, he did the same thing. We're still recovering from that. And then reducing critical federal spending by $2 trillion. That's nationwide. When we drill down to Alaska, just yesterday, Alex and I were watching the Senate Finance Committee where they were kind of looking at a fiscal overlook for the next 3 years. And this is something they do every year, but the shocking numbers that they are getting from the federal government about what to expect in cuts is completely disarming. So right now, nationwide, $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. Medicaid and SNAP, some of our most important programs that keep people healthy or fed, which is, you know, so many people are on the brink of poverty, right? We say one paycheck away. These programs are keeping them out of being homeless. And $880 billion. That obviously affects Alaska. And for Alaska, it's going to, you know, obviously those costs still exist. And if we as a state want to take care of those people and we, the state, pay for that reduction, it would be $250 million to our budget. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the deficit we already face in Alaska. That is not feasible for our budget. So we can't absorb that cut to federal funding. That's just for SNAP and Medicaid. Those were kind of the, I'm going to say highlights, the lowlights of what's happening with federal funding. So we have congressional Republicans putting together a budget that seeks to cut our most important programs, and they're not leaving Social Security untouched. They're not even leaving, well, I say they, but the Trump administration is not even leaving the military uncut. Just today, Pete Hegseth mentioned, hey, military, be prepared. We're going to come with cuts. So again, these are not things that they campaigned on. These are things they're doing now. And they're cutting all these things so that they can give these tax cuts to the wealthy. So it's just creating more social inequality. We all know who benefits from those tax cuts. It's not you and me. It's not 90% of working people. We're going to be the ones paying for these, and then also not receiving the services from the federal government.
Yep. They keep saying the wealth will trickle down. Well, it's been 40 to 50 years of, quote, the wealth trickling down. And where is the wealth? It's concentrated in the top 1%, even the top 0.5% of individuals in America.
And not only did it not trickle down, Alex, it got sent to space. I mean, literally, right? We have Elon Musk who's, running SpaceX. It's just going the opposite direction. It's leaving planet Earth at this point.
And I unfortunately did not prep this chart to show on the stream. And, it's a chart that you all are probably very familiar with. But when you look at the graph of union density in this country from the 1970s to 2024, it's like this. It's going down. But when you look at the graph of economic inequality and where the wealth is concentrated in this country, it's almost the exact. Oh, wow. I got my camera's mirrored, but you get the concept. It's almost exactly mirrored of union density. And that shows unions. And when working people band together, that is the only way that we as a working class can distribute the wealth that we create as workers. And at the end of the day, I know people don't like this term. They call it a lot of bad names, but this is at the end of the day, class warfare. This is pitting the rich against the working class. They use all these social issues to divide us, and it leaves us distracted while they give their rich friends a tax break and they cut our SNAP benefits and our Medicaid benefits.
That's right. And you and I both know that the Trump administration and his supporters know that we are powerful, and that is why they're reaching beyond their power as the executive branch to destroy that which we use to leverage our power, right? The National Labor Relations Act, the National Labor Relations Board, going after our AFGE brothers and sisters, our AFSCME brothers and sisters, anyone they can go after. They want to get rid of the probationary employees because they don't have those protections, pitting those non-repped employees with our union members. And we have to remember, we are here for all working people because work is what gives us dignity. It gives us a purpose, and it doesn't matter if you're represented or not. Work connects us all. And so we can't forget that when they come after us, when they start to divide us, like you said. You and I have been doing this long enough to know that sometimes these attacks are what creates the solidarity we need to fight. So out of all this chaos, I am looking for the point of hope where it unites us in a common goal to make sure that our work is lifted and people are hearing the stories of our federal brothers and sisters who are getting fired and the work they do and how important it is. Because there's this myth that the federal government is full of bloat and inefficiencies and fraud. And time after time, we see that that is not the case. We have federal employees covering the jobs of more than one person, right? Because actually a lot of their departments are understaffed. Or we have whole departments that are just probationary employees, which very much indicates to you that there is not a long-term staff. There's a long-term staffing issue in our federal government. So it actually is highlighting that myth. But I just hope we can all band together as working people to support each other and push back on these attacks on the federal government, because these people are members of our community and we do rely on their services to keep this country going and to keep our country safe.
Absolutely. And I love the positive tone you're taking, because while all that news that we just shared is honestly incredibly depressing, worrisome, and concerning, what can we do about it? That at the end of the day is what we need to be focused on as union members, as union siblings, as union allies. We need to be focused on what we can do. So, Kim,
absolutely,
what can we do?
Sure. That's the thing. And I've been having one-on-one coffees with people that I know just because they're like, I want to do 93 things. And it's not good for your mental health to think you need to, fly to DC and stand on the steps of the Capitol. These are not things that are feasible for most of us. There are things we can do as the public. One of the things, we have 3 congressional members, right? We have 1 House of Representatives member and 2 senators. Sometimes that seems like we don't have enough representation. The good news about only having 3 is it's completely feasible to write letters, call, make a meeting in their office when they're back in town. So you can reach out to Senator Lisa Murkowski, Senator Dan Sullivan, or Congressman Nick Begich and tell them how you feel about these cuts. You do not need to be the expert on what is happening. You do not need to know how much is being cut from what departments. That's their job. Your job is to tell your story. If you have a story as a federal worker who's been laid off or fired, or you're worried about your job or your neighbor, or you're worried about something else, the cuts to Medicaid, share your personal story with them, because that has so much more weight than just, I don't like these cuts because of the dollar figures, right? Or the economic effects. Now that can help, but make sure you're telling your personal story about why you care as an Alaskan, because that has a lot of weight. A lot of times when one of our representatives needs to push back on something, they use those stories on the floor in our government to talk about, here's a real person with a real effect. The other thing is they're collecting data. They want to know how many Alaskans are affected. Some of them are collecting it because they do care. Some are saying, I don't know if there's an effect. And so we really need to make sure people that feel comfortable sharing their story, because of course you're under attack. Sometimes you don't feel comfortable. But if you do feel comfortable, share your story with the congressional delegation, because they're taking note of that information. And then they can't say that they didn't know that there was an effect on Alaska. You and I both know Alaska relies on the federal government almost probably more than any other state, maybe Hawaii. Because we are so far away, we are so vast and so geographically different than other states. We really need federal support, federal funding, resources to keep our state moving. And so reach out to them, tell your story. It doesn't have to be 3 hours. It can be a couple of sentences. It all counts. That's one thing you can do. If you have a lot of energy and you need to get out and do something, we've got a rally today.
Boom.
Ready? Boom. Okay, so folks, if you are in Anchorage today, 4:30 p.m., 510 L Street downtown. That is the building that houses Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan's office. We're going to be out on the sidewalk rallying. It can be about whatever issue you want. We have a really large contingent coming today to talk about the importance of Medicaid, because so many Alaskans rely on Medicaid. Governor Bill Walker back in 2015 expanded Medicaid, and we have seen the positive results from that. And so we need to protect Medicaid to protect Alaskans' health. So there's going to be a large contingent. We'll be there to talk about pushing back on the illegal firings from the NLRB and the funding freezes that are stopping capital projects. That's stopping people going to work to build Alaska. Stopping funding for things that have already happened. So people aren't getting paid for the work they've already done. So we're going to be talking about that. If you have an issue, if you're worried about some of the confirmations coming up, for example, the FBI director, Lisa Murkowski, today just said she's going to oppose Kash Patel's nomination. If you want to talk about that, come talk about that. Come join us. We'll have a bullhorn. We'll have energy. We'll have chants. We'll have a good time. We'll also be able to be there and
one
share.
Of these awesome signs.
We have these.
Stop the billionaires.
Stop the billionaire takeover.
Workers over billionaires.
You can
beautiful signs that you yourself can take home if you come to the rally.
That's right. And we can put them everywhere. So we'll have that. Bring your own handmade signs. We love a handmade sign. My favorite one from last week was they're eating the checks, they're eating the balances. It's funny. It's also sad. But, we always say in these times, if you can't laugh about certain things, you'll just go crazy. And so make sure that you're taking care of yourself, but hone in on something you really care about and get involved. This is one way. Come to our rally. These are good ways to also meet people who care about the same things you do, and join in community with them and activate if you have other ideas. Also, the other thing you can always do to get involved is reach out to us, Alex, myself. Tell us what you're worried about. We can connect you with folks working in that sector, or we can give advice on how to talk. If you want to talk to our folks in Juneau about them pushing on Congress, or if you want to talk to folks in Juneau about how are we going to fill this federal funding gap, we can talk to you about that as well. We can also give you advice on how to talk to elected officials. That's what we're here for. We're here for everybody, all working people. And so please reach out to us. But mostly, we'd love to see you today at the rally. The weather is perfect for a rally, I must say.
This is perfect rally weather. Again, that's 510 L Street, right outside of Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan's office here in Anchorage, 4:30 to 5:30. Be there or be square. It's going to be the first, I think, of many actions like this to take place over the next 4 years. Guys, it's time to strap in. We're going to be here for the long haul because this behavior, what we're seeing at the federal level, is not going to go away, unfortunately, anytime soon. So it's going to take all of us banding together. Hey, that's what we do. That's what unions do. They band together, and that's what we got to do for the next 4 years. So, Kim.
That's right, Alex. We're used to this, unfortunately.
We're used to this.
Maybe not to this level, but
this is our bread and butter.
This is what we do.
That's so, Kim, right. Thank you so much for coming on the program, sharing your insights on what's going on and how we can help stop it, how we can advocate for better and stronger communities.
Absolutely. I appreciate everyone's time today. And like I said, reach out to us if you have questions or a story that you want to make sure the public is hearing about how this is affecting you. We're here for you guys. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope it wasn't too depressing. We need to use this information as fuel to encourage our activism and continue to advocate for a more just society where workers are on top, not billionaires. So again, thanks for watching and tune in next week.